Welcome to today's session. This is the Canada's Ocean Supercluster conversation around a joint call that we have with Innovate UK. We're really happy to have all of you here joining us, and we're going to talk through the call process. This might be a little bit tricky because this is the first time we've done one where it's a joint call with another international partner. And so there may be some questions that you have. For those of you who are dialing in from the UK or joining us from the UK, welcome. We really are happy to have you. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer your questions, and we'll probably redirect you back to Innovate UK, but we're going to talk today about the Canadian approach for how we can collaborate with our partners in the United Kingdom. If you can flip the slide, please. Overall, our agenda today is really talking about the overall program. We're going to talk about IP and data, and as it relates to the Ocean Supercluster and why it's so important to us. Memberships, the budget that's required, what the selection criteria is for projects, and a little around DEI, because that's fundamentally a critical piece to how we operate here in the Ocean Supercluster. And then we'll leave it open to all of you for some questions. Slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Ocean Supercluster, we are a member-led organization that is focused on investing in ocean technology. We're in our phase 2, our second phase after the first 5 years. Our success has generated 86 different projects with over $400 million of investment. We're really focused on creating collaboration. And for the most part lately, that's been, or up until now, it's been around collaboration in Canada, and now we're looking for increased collaboration across the Atlantic Ocean. Slide. And also Ambition 2035 is nothing we lose sight of. The Ocean Supercluster and its members and its key stakeholders got together to try to establish an overall goal for us by 2035, which is to grow the ocean sector to $220 billion. A huge portion of that comes from growing ocean energy, but also it's from advancing just general ocean technology, seafood, sustainable aquaculture, tourism, transportation, and general public sector. So these are things that are really important to us. Also important are our pillars. We are looking at overall growth, talent, because we need people to engage and support with all of the businesses and the new technology we're developing. Community engagement is fundamental to ensure that there's support, adoption, and comprehension awareness of what it is we're trying to build. And then the other piece that's really important to us is the global ocean brand. And nothing like having a joint call with the UK to demonstrate how Canada is a leader in the ocean sector. Slide. For the ocean sector and our 2.0, so the new 5 phase that we're in for the OSC, we have 4 key areas that are real growth potential for us. So referencing scaled ocean energy, sustainable seafood, future transportation, and ocean climate solutions. These are the areas for all of our calls. So if you are interested in participating with the Ocean Supercluster, whether it's part of both this UK call or our general core program, or if you're interested in waiting for some of our future calls around climate, for example, which we should be having soon, these are the areas where we're really looking to invest in your projects and invest in the technology you're looking to grow. So today, maybe you're joining to learn about this specific UK call, and it might end up that it's not for you, but there might be something else that we can do to support you. Slide. So for this call, let's talk about what we jointly, collectively have come together with Innovate UK to look at. Alternative energy, aquaculture. There's a whole long list of items here, and our definitions were really loose. We had back and forth about how defined we got on these topics, and we decided not to go too specific because this is where collaboration and partnerships across the UK and Canada are really important, and trying to find how technology and development and partnerships can really feed into these topics. If you have questions around the specific areas and themes, we encourage you to please reach out. There's going to be an email address, which you'll see, which is ukcanada@oceansupercluster.ca. Send us an email if you're not sure, because we obviously don't want you putting time and effort into an expression of interest, building out a partnership with someone, if it ends up that maybe it doesn't quite fit this theme. But for the most part, these are very broad themes and there's lots of them. So we welcome you to engage and submit an EOI that covers off one of these topics. Slide. The program overview, most important thing is when this is due. It is due a month today. It is due at 8 p.m. Atlantic, 4 p.m. Pacific. All of those documentation and the pieces that you're required to review and that will give you some insight are all available on the website. Your submission is going to be done by email. We do acknowledge and send back a response that we have received it. Of course, sometimes when it's 8 o'clock at night, it might be a little delayed, but nevertheless, you will receive a response back. So double check to make sure you did get the response. Sometimes things can get sent. So we've had email systems that go down. There's lots of these different challenges that you can kind of run into. So just know that you'll be sending it by email and you'll receive a confirmation back from us letting you know that we've received it. For those who are successful in the EOI proposal stage, you will be invited, or sorry, in the EOI stage, you'll be invited into a proposal. And we have the dates here on screen that will show you what our current timelines are for that proposal turnaround. November 27th with the return back on January 10th. This aligns with the UK process as well. Also, there's some FAQs in the guidelines, so do be sure to check those out. And of course, if unfortunately you're not successful, we will absolutely reach out. Happy to have a conversation with you to talk about different things and whether that can turn into some other proposal or concept or way we can support you to turn that into something that's of value to you. Slide. And this is complicated for some folks to try to get their heads around, I get. So how this happens is, as a call in general, we have to have 3 organizations that come together. There must be a Canadian eligible lead, there must be a UK lead, and then there needs to be a third partner that comes in here into play. And so if it's a Canadian partner, we'll get into the definition of what Canadian partners are, but no matter what, there needs to be 3 partners that come together on this collaboration. And it's up to the Canadian entities and the UK entities to determine whether or not they qualify, go through the specific criteria. The UK requirements are different than Canada. And so if you are a Canadian entity, you have to qualify under our definition. If you're a UK entity, the criteria is very different. And so ensuring that your organization that you're partnering with complies with their criteria is also really important. Slide. Let's talk purely about OSC. And so any OSC project, in theory, this is our normal summary, is that it must include 2 investing industry members. In this situation, you may end up having 1 investing industry member because there are 2 UK participants, and that's okay. So where it says 2+, this is the one time where there's going to be a bit of flexibility on this. But your project still must include at least 1 who fits in that very first column. There must be an industry partner. There's very clear definitions that are prescriptive that we don't have the ability to influence and change. Your projects can include people who aren't investing and providing a financial investment. They can be associate members such as academic institutions, a federal crown, or you can still have industry members who are part of your project but aren't providing a financial contribution. And so there's no limit to that. We welcome you to have as many partners as you want who are welcome you to have as many collaborators as you would like. But no matter what, there has to be an industry member who is leading it. They have to fit the definition of industry member, and there has to be at least one of those organizations who's bringing this forward. Slide. For the application process and what's going to happen, your lead applicant, Canadian entity, is going to come in and submit to the OSC. So we're purely talking the OSC requirement. Those EOIs are going to be evaluated by our Canadian Evaluation Committee. The successful EOIs will then be partnered and compared with the successful EOIs in the UK. And we have another slide on that in a second. And then the unsuccessful ones will be contacted. A couple of key pieces in the guidelines that you'll see are things like the start date. It must start by June 1st, 2024, and project durations are up to 12 months. Next slide. Their overall process. So these are the dates. There's some dates in here for the EOI, but we go through the overall launch and then the call, and then we evaluate and assess those proposals. You get feedback if unsuccessful, invited again to the proposals, get feedback again. And then those successful ones would go to our board to be ratified, and then we move forward into contracting. One point of note is we're really trying to expedite contracting. So when we do get to a proposal stage, what we're trying to do is really streamline the details that go into work packages, intellectual property charts and data charts and other pieces, because we're trying to extrapolate that and go into a contract. And so we're trying to make this a lot faster and cleaner turnaround. And we're seeing that very successfully right now on our AI call. Slide. Bear with the ugly design. This is essentially an overall partnership of two processes where we come together. And as just to clarify, you're coming in and providing an EOI for the OSC on the Canadian portion. And so the UK partners are coming in and providing their contribution and their EOI into the Innovate UK. And we'll do our own assessments and then come together and align. And then it's the same thing going further along. And this means then that Canadian entities are not signing the UK contracts and vice versa. When you're bringing forward your UK partners, they're not required to sign the Canadian contract. And then we're trying to avoid having you as a Canadian entity find a lawyer who can understand contracts and deal with other jurisdictions. This is why the funds that the OSC is awarding are only being awarded to Canadian entities, and the UK funds are only being awarded to the UK entities. Slide. In the guidelines as well, you'll see there's a very quick summary of what goes into the application process. We included this in our energy call and our AI call, and this is just for full transparency so that you see the breadth and the scope and the detail of information that's required in the proposal. It's not an immaterial amount of work. We are investing in you as an organization and your project, and we will believe in what you are doing and support you as best as we can. And we just want to make sure that as organizations, when you're going and taking time to build both an expression of interest and proposal, you get the chance to see how much work is required to actually go and pull documentation, due diligence documentation that's required. And so this is a checklist so that you can get a chance to see how much work is required before building out that proposal. Slide. Our project selection criteria. There's a very high level overview within the guidelines. Next slide. And it allocates the percentages. So keep in mind, this is not just about Canada. We're talking about Canada and the UK and our ocean sectors. And so we really want to see that there's great relevance to what you're trying to produce and what your project is all about. But also we're looking for strong contribution to both ecosystems. The project business case is fundamental. What is that commercial outcome? What are you creating? Why is this going to be of great value? Who is the market? Who are the competitors? Those are all the things that will eventually feed into this. The collaboration is really great as well because we're looking to see how you and your partners are going to work together to create something that is good for both of you. And the impact is going to have. And so we'll get into our DEI discussion shortly, but what is that overall reach and impact that you're having that goes just beyond those commercial outcomes? And then, of course, the project execution plan, budget, all of that. We need to make sure that costs make sense, that they've been timed and aligned well, that you have the skills and expertise on your team to deliver on this. And so there's lots of criteria that's been outlined in some summary bullets, but a lot of that moves further into the proposal where you'll be required to demonstrate this in greater depth. Next slide. The IP and data. Next slide. So fundamentally important to what any of the clusters across Canada, the superclusters, do is understanding the intellectual property that's developed coming out of all of the projects that we invest in. And increasingly so, we're also really looking at data. And, you know, having spent many years in the ocean sector, there's always conversations around, we just don't have access to data. And so if we look only at the data piece, we're trying to add more emphasis on asking project teams to outline and detail and provide some kinds of summaries of data that might get produced as a result of a project. This doesn't mean that we're looking to have access to or store data. It's still very much at a high level. We have a platform currently that we use that allows members, or through a member portal, where they currently detail intellectual property, which I'll touch on in a second. But we're doing the same thing with data. If your project collects a vast amount of images of underwater fish, or if it is tracking GIS data on movement of different things, it's really important to think about how the data you have might actually help someone else, whether they were buying it themselves or using it for their own purposes. And so we're looking to have members and project teams provide a bit of a summary of data to let people know, here's what I have at a high level, and it might be of interest to someone. The second piece is around IP registry. We have someone on our team, Shafiq, who's our director of IP, and he is happy to work with you as we start building out plans around intellectual property. This isn't necessarily getting details around patents or trade secrets, but it's starting to think about the output that comes from a project. And so we do require project teams to detail some of the IP that will be generated from our projects. But if that's language or concepts or tricky parts that you're not used to, During the proposal phase, he's absolutely happy to sit down and talk about your IP strategy, support you with documenting what that IP looks like, and helping you better wrap your head around how do you detail and document intellectual property that's generated as a result of a project so that we can better track and monitor this. And these are part of our own funding requirements. We report back to ICED on the amount of IP that is created from projects, not the specifics, but the high-level version of it. And so we're here to help you figure out how it can benefit you, but also at the same time, how it can help us in our reporting. Next slide. This is a really quick overview. This is what the screenshot of a member portal looks like and where people go to fill out the their IP. And again, Shafiq's highlighted in this slide. It's a non-confidential description, but it means it's a very high level description. So it's something that just at a high level, I trained a machine learning model on how to identify fish. And that could be as simple as it is. Next slide. I'm going to pass it over to Jakob, and Jakob is going to talk about the Ocean Supercluster membership.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm here to give you just a quick overview of the membership opportunity with the OSC. I'll talk about member benefits, when you're required to become a member in your OSC funding application journey, as well as I'll explain any financial contribution requirements. Now, before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm currently located on the traditional and unceded Wolastoqiyik People's Territory, right on the banks of the Wolastoq River. And I acknowledge this as someone who just recently moved to these beautiful lands and tries to understand the history and the harms of the past, and as well how I can contribute to moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And just a quick note to everyone that you can ask your questions by clicking on the Q&A bubble on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be able to address those at the end of the webinar as a team. So Canada's Ocean Supercluster is an industry-led and member-led organization. And what that means for us is that our work is guided by our members, who are currently close to 600 diverse organizations from across the country and internationally as well. In the call for proposals guidelines, you will have seen mentions of OSC membership requirements. This is essential in order to be able to receive funding from the OSC eventually. And membership with the OSC is also a fantastic way to get connected with others in the ocean ecosystem and be part of the collective intelligence of our network. Next slide, please. So when should you become the OSC member? You may ask, and Jennifer talked to you about this particular slide. I have layered on membership requirements that are, by the way, explained in the call for proposals guidelines, so you can always come back to that document if in doubt. As it is at this stage you're at now, in order to submit the expression of interest for this particular call, you're not required to become the OSC member. However, if your EOI is advanced to the next stage, you'll have to become a member with the OSC before the full proposal development deadline. So that's the first yellow box there. It's important to remember about that, as your application will be disqualified if you have not submitted your application on the day of the deadline. And then if a project proposal submission is selected, each investing organization making cash and in-kind contributions and seeking OSC matching funds must become an OSC member and must sign a project agreement setting out the terms and conditions of the project prior to any eligible funds being dispersed by the OSC. So you may wonder what are the types of the OSC membership, and I'll now give you a high-level overview of the two types of the membership that we have. Next slide, please. Here on the left-hand side, you can see associate membership, and that is the membership type suited for non-private sector organizations. So that's non-profit, post-secondary institutions and academia, and government organizations. If you become an associate member, you can get access to the OSC network. And the collective intelligence of that network. You get access to our events, receive a member-only communication. You get access to the member portal and receive marketing services from the OSC. There is no requirement to become a member at this EOI stage. However, we recommend that you become a member as soon as possible to get all the benefits. With associate membership, you're not eligible to receive much funding from the OSC. And for industry members or for industry organizations, we have industry membership that's suited to obviously private sector organizations as well as indigenous organizations. And industry membership is what enables the OSC to match your funds on a project. So if you won't be able to receive any funding if you're not our member. So we often get asked, are there any membership fees with the OSC? So the membership itself with the OSC is free of charge. You can join today and benefit from being a part of the network. We don't have any fees. Only when you have a project contracted with the OSC, industry members are asked to contribute a portion of their OSC investment to cluster building activities. This portion is 12.75% of the OSC contribution that the OSC contributes to your project. Now, in order to visualize this better, I know it can be a bit complex. On the next slide, I'll show you a sample project layout and how these commitments work. So here you can see a typical setup of an OSC funded project. On the right-hand side, you see the companies that are in the consortium and their contributions to their project. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the OSC matched funds that are contributed based on the project agreement that we sign. Now, once the project is contracted, as Jennifer mentioned before, you will be eligible to start submitting claims for reimbursements. Now, just imagine your company A in this scenario. So right-hand side. In your case, the 12.75% of the OSC contribution to your project, so that's the little box here on the left-hand side of the funding agreement, gray box. So the 12.75% of the OSC contribution to your project will be deducted, and we would take that funding and reinvest it in cluster building activities. Cluster building activities are projects that benefit the whole blue economy in Canada and address key challenges that our members face. These projects include Indigenous engagement programs, 2-eyed seeing program, helping to grow our startups in Canada, building a robust talent pipeline, as well as equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. And now, again, this contribution will be deducted from the OSC payout each quarter as you submit your project claims. So that's all for me. I hope the membership information and requirements are clear for you. And again, while you don't have a requirement to join the OSC member right now, you're welcome to do so and start benefiting from the network. More information can be found on our website, oceansupercluster.ca. And now I'll hand over to my colleague, Danielle Babstock, to walk you through some of the finance and budget fundamentals. Thank you all.
Hi, everybody. My name's Danielle Babstock. My pronouns are she and her. And I just want to acknowledge that I live, work, and rest on the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk. And I also live on the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kma'ki. I commit to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for everybody. So I'm going to speak today about the financial implications of your project. So that'll be, the budget itself, any reimbursements that you will receive from the OSC, and how you go about getting that, and the criteria for your budget overall for this project. So next slide, please. So the OSC has a funding model overall. So we reimburse you on your costs. So we're a reimbursement model, not a grant program. So you would have to spend your money first, submit your claim to the OSC, and then we'll reimburse you at a maximum of 50% of the costs associated with the project. And those costs need to adhere to our cost eligibility guidelines, which are available on our website. So, for example, every dollar that you spend that meets our eligibility criteria, the OSC will reimburse you 50 cents on that dollar. So once you get through the process of, your EOI, your proposal, and all that, you'll get a letter of conditional award. And so that means that your project has been conditionally approved, and there are some criteria that you'd have to meet. Some of that criteria is financial. So the OSC will conduct financial due diligence on the Canadian project partners contributing to this project. And so we would be looking into any financial statements, cash flow forecasts, and this is to protect, to mitigate any risk associated with us funding your project and to ensure that you have the funds to be able to spend them up front and get those funds from the OSC. Next slide, please. So there are some program-specific requirements for this Canada-UK call, and those requirements are that the reimbursement rate, as I said already, has to be a maximum of 50%. It can be less than that, so it could be 25% or whatever. But that the maximum is 50%, and it's only for Canadian participants. So we won't be reimbursing any UK organizations. And once you start incurring costs for your project, you would have to submit claims to us quarterly, and we would reimburse them at that ratio. So the OSC requested funds. There's a limit here on the threshold that's available for you. So minimum contribution from the OSC is $280,000, and then the maximum is $850,000. So that would mean that you would also have to contribute an additional $280,000 to $850,000. You can contribute more than that, but the maximum reimbursement that the OSC is going to give you is 50%. So the UK funds must represent they're the same threshold. They're just in Great Britain pounds. So that's 165,000 pounds to 500,000 pounds. And so no more than 60% of the total funds requested can come from either the OSC or Innovate UK. So if OSC is contributing $60,000, the UK organization will also have to contribute $40,000. So it has to be that ratio and vice versa, right? And obviously the representation in pounds would be applicable there. So then additionally, 3 project participants are required. So one of them has to be Canadian, as Jen has already said, and then the other one has to be, so another one of them has to be a UK company, and then our third one has to be a Canadian or a UK company. So it can be either or. But the UK companies, again, won't be matched by the OSC and won't receive any funds from us. Next slide, please. The OSC financial requirements. So this is once your project is contracted and approved. You may be eligible for quarterly advances. So if there are concerns with cash flow, there is a process that we can go through to look into getting advances of our funds. And we can provide those quarterly, and they must be reconciled quarterly. And then any project participants recouping funds from the OSC must submit quarterly claims. So those claims would be calendar quarters, so April to June, July to September, and so on. And they would need to be submitted by our deadlines, which would be outlined in your project agreement. And we're only able to reimburse on funded eligible project costs. So our cost eligibility guidelines, again, are on the website, but these guidelines would detail anything that is eligible for reimbursement. And they're also subject to change. So we try and update them to make them as clear as possible. And if there's any changes to our program or our funding agreements with ISED, we would update our guidelines to ensure that those adhere to that. And they would be applicable from the date of initiation of that new guideline. And again, yes, only Canadian companies who have a role in the project can receive OSC match funding and sign on as a project participant to the project agreement. So you have to sign the project agreement and be a member to be able to receive funds from us. But any Canadian organization that is involved in the project and meets the industry membership criteria can receive funds from the OSC. Next slide, please. So this is the EOI budget template that would be required for you to submit with your EOI submission. So this is a high-level view of your budget, but You would have to outline here the OSC funding that you're receiving, the UK funding contribution, and then you would identify any other partners. So you have to have your Canadian partner, your UK partner, and you would list any other additional partners that are coming onto this agreement. So if you're receiving government funding, you would include that in here. If there are contributions coming from collaborators that aren't anticipating a match from the OSC, those contributions would need to be included in here as well. And then this template has some built-in conditional formatting, so it'll make sure that you're adhering to those guidelines that I talked about a little bit earlier with respect to the ratios between Canada or the OSC and Innovate UK, as well as the 50% reimbursement. And I think that might be it for me, but we can go to the next slide. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Ralph, and he'll talk to you about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. I'm coming today from my own territory, Mi'kma'ki, or specifically Dalgunguk, or the island of Newfoundland. So happy to join you today, wherever you are coming from. Just wanted to speak in the last bit of information slide here on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm happy to bring that and explain that to you a little bit today. We at the OSC strive to create a diverse and equitable and inclusive environment that supports OSC and our associated projects as a safe and creative space for innovation. And maybe a good place here as well, I can see that there's some questions in our Q&A. So just a gentle reminder again that this is our last component of information, and then we'll get to our Q&A section after our DEI slides. So just a reminder that that's over on the right-hand side on the Q&A button if you wanted to post your questions there. Through our own operations, I guess, in the development of our ecosystem, the OSC promotes DEI through meaningful collaborations. You heard that word a lot today, and partnerships with Indigenous and underrepresented communities. And we'd like to encourage you to do the same in your own projects to support essentially three outcomes. First, seeking a diverse consortium of project participants and collaborators contributes to the social and economic benefits to our underrepresented communities. And the proposal template will ask you to identify your diverse participants and collaborators. And we've defined that for this purpose as any organization having a primary strategic focus on supporting diversity, or it can also be a company that's majority owned by a person representing an Indigenous or other underrepresented group. And the second outcome is in strengthening the talent pipeline to foster career growth for underserved populations and under-recognized groups. And then the third outcome of DEI in our project proposals speaks to the benefits that enhance Indigenous community capacity in business, employment, training, and education. Next slide, please. Okay. So we mentioned the collaborations, but in addition to identifying diverse project participants and collaborators, we also had requirements within the project. We require either a DEI policy, or in the absence of an existing policy, we ask that you develop a diversity statement that will be applied to the project. So the DEI policy could already be in place in either the lead participants organization or one of the other participants. And we'd like you to utilize that for the entire project team for the project. And if a DEI policy is not available from the participants, we can also consider a project diversity statement. And that would highlight your diversity commitments for the project. And we ask that your statement address three things: setting diverse workforce targets for historically underrepresented groups, providing respectful workplace policies that address issues such as bullying, harassment, and violence, and then thirdly, describing the diversity training, or it could be other initiatives that are in place or will be put in place for the project team. So these DEI commitments will be tracked along with your other project KPIs in your project reporting. So it's very important for us to, for you first to state what you're going to do to support DEI, and then to report on that just like you would any other KPI. So we recognize that the project teams, the participants, may be at different places in their DEI journey. And our goal is essentially to position you for success and maximize opportunities for your project team. So we're currently developing tools and supports to help you meet your diversity targets and identified outcomes, which will be made available to you during your project. So that's it for the information we have today. I see there are some questions there, so I'll invite everyone now, all the presenters, to come back to our stage here. And I think Jen will lead or direct those questions to any of us that you have questions for today.
Great, thanks so much, Ralph. So a couple things. I did get a note from someone who ran into some problems. So if others know of some challenges getting on the platform, please reach out and let us know. Also, we're going, if somebody might have to mute on our end at OSC team. My point was, sorry, got sidetracked by the noise. We will definitely be putting this online. We'll also do a translation with captions at the bottom so that anyone who's looking for a French version will be able to find this in French. So some of the questions that came in around the presentation, absolutely, we can get the presentation. It will be uploaded onto our website, and we'll probably do a social post through all of our usual channels like LinkedIn, Instagram, and some others to ensure that you get a chance to find a link. But if not, you'll find it if you go onto our main website. On the left, you'll see a tab that gives you access to the UK call. And so we'll have that uploaded there. So it will be a video as well as the presentation itself. And there's a question around, are you looking for EOIs in any sector or specific sector? So the ocean sector is the biggest one in terms of industries or areas that we're looking for. There was that one slide that we referenced earlier on that talks about a broad range of robotics and aquaculture and energy. There's a whole long list of them. So like I said earlier, feel free to reach out and let us know if there's something that's of interest to you that you didn't necessarily think fits into one of those categories. Please feel free to reach out. UK Canada at oceansupercluster.ca is how you can reach out to us. And if there are any other questions, we welcome them. Jakob, if you'd like to pop on and add a comment, I'm trying to read and at the same time. But if you have any other questions, please feel free to post them. None.
I'll also add that if there's any other questions about the budget or funding, people can reach out to me at my email. It's Danielle.Babstock at Canada's oceansupercluster.ca, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have later on down the road.
Maybe similarly, I will add, if you have questions about the benefits related to the membership with the OSC, you can email us at membership@oceansupercluster.ca.
And one final piece that you just made me think of with membership, thank you, Jakob. There is a B2B match program through Innovate UK. And so tomorrow we'll be posting on our socials. So there is a link associated with it that the Innovate UK program, who tends to work on a lot of international collaboration, you can reach out to that program if you're looking for your own partner. Is the less than 60% funding split between Canada UK entities pre-match funding or post-match funding? It is on the matched funding. So if you were to add up, and I realize there's two different values, we have Canadian dollars and we have UK dollars, and if it's helpful, we could always do a conversion, but we do have in the budget template, Danielle did add a static rate for you to actually go and oh my gosh, why is my brain not working? From UK to Canada for conversion. So what we're essentially looking for is that we don't want the if you look at the overall total project in general, we don't want the OSC funding 100% and 10% of activity is happening, or contribution for Innovate UK is happening on the UK side of things. So we're looking for that match dollar rate. So in the actual project template, you'll see there's an amount that comes from industry in Canada, industry in the UK, UK funding from Innovate UK, and then OSC. And then that's where the dollar split comes from, a 60-40 split maximum coming from each of those jurisdictions based on the contribution that is the investment coming from the funding body, not from the industry in and of itself. So in theory, you could have a huge chunk of investment dollars coming from a Canadian partner, but maybe they're not eligible to be matched, or maybe it's not part of the matching request. So it just really comes down to the matching dollars of the 60-40 split, max 60-40. The timeline seems tight. Absolutely. You're right. So the timeline is tight for, so someone said the timeline is tight for October. Can that matchmaking happen in the next phase? Unfortunately, it can't, because of the way the process is working, where it's an Innovate UK and a Canada proposal. You'd have to have somebody who's already come forward and is submitting their own EOI. We recognize that this is not a long turnaround time, and the challenge you run into is that to do the announcement and to turn things around, given the 2 phases, it could take a really long time. So 2 things can happen. One is maybe you do quickly find a partner, and you can prepare something quickly and submit, and then spend more time on a more developed proposal, and the expression of interest remains high level on both jurisdictions. The alternative is maybe this turns into some other future collaboration. So if you end up meeting someone from the UK through this process, there might be some incredible new opportunity. And we very well, if this goes well, we very well could go to Innovate UK and say, let's do this again. It's been really successful. Or there's such great demand, we think we should be exploring this again. Does collaboration include students in Canada or just Canadian professionals? So collaboration, so there's a definition there. Jakob and I both had a slide up there that referenced what a collaborator is. A collaborator essentially is somebody who's not providing financial contribution and is either a list of associate members, academic institutions, or is a company. The collaborators, you don't have to have a collaborator, but we welcome them. It makes a project that much more successful. Ralph just talked about what DEI looks like and how we can engage communities and individuals. We very much look for strong collaboration among others. Jakob, is there anything that I should touch on that we should touch on for that?
I think you covered it all.
But we often get a list of collaborators, and sometimes it's not clear what their role is. So I would add that they should have an active role in the project as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there a contact list for UK companies? There is not, but there is that match program. And so we'll get that post out tomorrow that has the UK. Also, I think if you did a quick Google for the UK site, there you quickly find the match program. It's called a B2B match program. The EOI template details the UK partner only. Can you please clarify the partner role, and if it can be a Canadian organization, and clarify the role of partner versus lead role? I don't have it open. I apologize. In theory, if I recall correctly, the proposal template should have the lead, which is a Canadian entity, partners, which would be Canadian partners, and then UK partners. If it only details one UK partner, then simply copy that section and add it again for the second UK partner. So there needs to be 3 of those financially contributing entities or organizations that are contributing. And hopefully that clarifies it. Can the OSC help match companies from both sides? If we have a project in Canada, but don't have a partner yet in the UK through Innovate UK. So no. So if you have companies, Canada can only match funds to Canadian entities, per Danielle's talk about dollars and where dollars come from and where dollars go. We can only invest in Canadian entities. The Innovate UK, same thing. They can only invest in UK entities. If it ends up that you're building something out and you don't have those 2 paths finalized, we welcome you to explore other avenues with us, because there might be something that you have as a Canadian entity or a couple of partners, and we could turn that into one of our core projects that we partner and invest in. So if it ends up that finding that UK partner is the real challenge, this might just be an introduction to you working with us, or a future potential opportunity of collaboration in the future with the UK partner if there's a new program. Can new partners be added post EOI stage? We've run into this before, and team, feel free to jump in. So we've run into this before where sometimes, let's say Jakob and I were together putting in a proposal and something fell through, and Jakob decided, actually, you know what, we don't have the capacity for it, something's changed. And then Danielle had a similar business and we decided to come together, and she could match and met the same criteria. She knew she was a going concern company and could participate equally. in the EOI into the proposal stage, provided it's in the same jurisdiction on the Canadian side. It can happen. We prefer not to see it, but if it happens, we're not necessarily going to say this isn't going to proceed. We'll work with you on trying to figure out how we could go forward. But I can't say what happens on the UK side. So if it ends up that something happened and you had a partner on the UK side and it ends up that that didn't go through and you have to swap it out because it's going through the UK's process, it's probably not as flexible because we're dealing with two different countries here. I'm trying to see, did we miss any other questions? Anybody has any other questions? I don't see any others. Do any of you?
No, I can add some extra detail to the diversity piece in case anybody was wondering who we talked about underrepresented or equity deserving groups, but for what we've been doing, we've used the Canada's 50-30 challenge definition for that. So that would include women, Indigenous people, persons with disabilities, visible minorities, 2S LGBTQ, I think I forgot a B plus, any sexually diverse peoples, identifying that way.
Thanks very much. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. I don't see any other questions. So please, if you have anything that isn't clear, again, this will be posted online, so you'll be able to go back and revisit. But if there's something that you have that you aren't quite sure about, please reach out, UK Canada at oceansupercluster.ca. If you have membership questions, membership at members or membership, as I just said that.
Membership at oceansupercluster.ca.
There we go. And Jakob can get back to you on that one as well. Danielle will help out with any of the questions you have, same to that, the UK email address, and same with Ralph as well, especially as we get into elements around DEI policies, DEI statements, and other things that are critically important for all of the collaboration definitions for our projects. So we welcome you to participate in this call. If this call isn't the one that's best for you, please reach out, because there's lots of other ways to engage, and we're happy to support and see how the OSC can support you and how you're working towards helping us drive Canada's ocean sector to be even stronger. Thank you for taking the time, and thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. And we will see you and your proposals.